Illegal immigration has become a major topic of debate in the U.S., especially after the election of President Donald Trump. His bold claims and perspective and take on the matter has divided the U.S. in two. His idea of a border wall and the atrocities that illegal immigrants commit is quite startling and can cause great harm to some immigrants just trying to make a good life for themselves and in the end, having the American dream. This begs the question, just how harmful is illegal immigration?
One of the first things to be brought up when discussing illegal immigration is the economy. Even though these people are not legal citizens, they still boost our economy. This is because of a couple reasons. One being that they are a significant part of the U.S. workforce and continue to raise the average GDP.
GDP is comprised of growth in the workforce and then growth in productivity. So if you have slowing workforce growth, that tells you that that's going to create a real headwind for GDP growth. Immigrants and their children, based on our work at the Dallas Fed, have made up more than half of the workforce growth in the United States in the last 20 years. Immigrants and their children. And it's our judgment that in the next 20 years, that percentage will be even higher because existing workforce is aging and will age out of the workforce. So while it's very controversial and a sensitive subject, obviously, we're going to need to come to grips in this country at some point with immigration reform that helps us find a way to grow immigration.
Another reason is that these immigrants pay taxes. The third reason is that many immigrants build their own businesses. This not only means more tax money, but this also creates many more jobs for other immigrants or even people from the U.S. These benefits do not have people completely convinced, though, as shown in this clip from Fox News.
Half of illegals pay their taxes, says Hillary Clinton. You should be impressed and grateful. A new study shows that just last year, immigrants living in the United States sent at least $120 billion in remittances to the countries they came from. Even in an age of expanding costs, $120 billion is a lot of money. It's more, for example, than we spent on the first Gulf War. It's more than the entire Russian military spends every 2 years. That's enough money to buy Costco, not the stuff on the shelves, but the entire company, and still have $15 billion left over.
Although, yes, it is true that the U.S. pays many countries, but this has nothing to do with the fact that illegal immigration from Mexico boosts our economy. Plus, if he wants to talk about the price of keeping immigrants, it's only fair to mention that the annual cost of deporting illegal immigrants is $250 billion. But let's say, hypothetically, that the correct course of action would be to shut all immigrants out with something like a wall.
Build that wall, 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 build that wall.
From the beginning of his candidacy, President Trump said he would build a wall along the U.S.-Mexican border, but now that he hasn't, it has become a national emergency.
Why is the United States in the midst of a government shutdown?
The government shutdown is now the longest on record.
Possible government shutdown becomes a reality.
The longest government shutdown in U.S. history.
Am I happy at first glance? I just got to see it. The answer is no. I'm not. I'm not happy.
This wall's purpose would obviously be to keep unwanted visitors out. But would the wall truly work? There are a couple of flaws with this plan. The first being the cost. Estimates range from $8 billion to $70 billion. So for the sake of simplicity, let's average that out to be $39 billion. It may not seem like a lot, but to be put that number into perspective, that's enough to give 75,000 small businesses a $520,000 boost to kick off their business. Going back to earlier, rather than spending this huge sum on a wall to lock others from the country, the money would be much better spent on a small business to grow their economy even further. It's a much better than a wall that would be almost completely unable to stop the drugs and crime that it would be trying to stop. You did hear that right. The wall would be extremely ineffective. Drugs tend to come into the U.S. from Mexico through secret tunnels and underground passageways, which would render the wall that would be above ground useless. This would not be a quick and simple endeavor either. The wall could take 10 years to build, at least, with around 10,000 workers working 5 days a week on a 1,000-mile stretch of wall. It would take about 11 years to build, and that wouldn't even span the whole Mexican border, which is 1,954 miles long, which would leave ample room to go around. That's the biggest problem with a wall. Unless it goes around the entire world, it could always be walked around, and even then it could still be dug under or climbed over.
Now to zoom in a bit. Instead of looking at the effects on the country, let's see how these immigration measures affect the families of these supposed criminals. Yes, it is true that some crime does come over from Mexico through illegal immigration, but many are just trying to start a better life. As stated before, many come looking for work or to start their own business.
In Alabama, farming is more than just a way of life. It's the state's #1 industry, and until recent years relied heavily on immigrant workers. But 6 years ago, Alabama introduced the country's harshest anti-illegal immigration law, and undocumented workers left in droves.
They really didn't like it, especially the ones that had a big crop in the field and they lost all their workers.
Third-generation farmer Scott Benton says the effect on farming was devastating.
Pretty bad that year. Like I said, a lot of people left, and all the workers left, and people were, already had the crops out there ready to harvest, so they didn't have anybody to pick them. So a lot of farms lost their whole crop.
In the 6 years since this law was put into place, it's become fairly clear that agriculture, businesses and even church services have been impacted. So if there is a lesson to be learnt here in Alabama, it's that these kinds of laws aren't just hard to put into place, they're also hard to enforce without affecting the wider community. Andy Gallagher, Al Jazeera, Clanton, Alabama.
Many argue that no matter the type of people, they are still illegal. This argument is just inhumane. Many families are torn apart at the border due to thinking like this. Many adults are prosecuted while the children are taken away to orphanages. At least 389 family separations have occurred since 2018, and immigrant advocates say that there's even more than that. Of these 389, only 241 have been discharged, with only 59 returning to their actual parents. 159 are reunified with an individual sponsor or other family member, and it is unknown what happened to the 23 others that were discharged. These conditions show us...
We have our first unfiltered look this morning inside a facility for separated immigrant children. CBS News obtained cell phone video from inside the Cayuga centers in New York. The clip shows children huddled in what looked like classrooms, including one crying girl who couldn't talk to her mother. Vladimir Duthier of our streaming network, CBSN, shows how the children are coping after weeks of separation from their family.
Leo, ¿cómo estás?
When we first see Leo, he's all smiles.
¿Estás triste?
But that smile disappears when he's asked if he's sad about being away from his mother. Attorney Michael Avenatti represents Leo's mother, Lourdes. He says the two were separated 48 hours after arriving at the Texas border May 10th. Leo was sent to the Cayuga centers in New York. He's one of 243 separated children there, according to Mayor Bill de Blasio. Cayuga cares for the children during the day. At night, they go home to foster families.
Jessica? Yeah, Jessica, no llores, okay?
This young girl named Jessica said she arrived at the U.S. with her 10-year-old brother. She was crying because she wanted to speak to her mother.
¿Has hablado con ella? ¿Quieres hablar con ella otra vez?
It's quite obvious at this point that immigration policies need to change. Doing something as drastic as building a wall would not only be ineffective, it would also hurt our economy by both shutting out Mexican workers and by taking much of taxpayers' money. The toll that our current border security takes on innocent families also needs to be stopped. Instead of Trump's no exception policy, why not screen immigrants and allow them to come through?